I never meant to open the folder that night. The cloud account was supposed to be routine, our shared storage, our symbol of transparency, as Clara liked to call it. She'd insisted on it years ago, saying, "No secrets, Ethan." That's how marriages rot. Maybe she believed that once. Maybe I did too. But when the thumbnail appeared, an unfamiliar video buried under backups and receipts, something in me froze. It was named simply img_4521.mov. The kind of name your phone assigns when it doesn't care what's inside. I double-clicked. My coffee went cold in my hand before the screen even loaded. A hotel room appeared first. Not one I knew. White sheets, a gold headboard, a skyline framed by rain. And then her. Clara. My wife. My miracle from college, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after long nights studying constitutional law. Except now she was laughing, really laughing. The way she hadn't in years. The kind of laugh that comes from being wanted. And beside her, half naked, was a man I recognized from newspaper photos and charity galas. Adrian Keller. Investor. Millionaire. The kind of man whose smile made men uneasy and women curious. He reached for her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her eyes softened in a way they never did for me anymore. My breath caught. I didn't rage. I didn't throw the mug or curse the ceiling. I just watched. The video wasn't pornographic. Not really. It was worse. Intimate. Real. A slow kiss that built into the kind of touch only two people who think they're alone can share. His hand slid down her back. Her sigh filled the speakers. I could smell the ghost of her perfume in the living room, the same scent she wore to court hearings. I should have stopped it there. But I didn't. I watched to the end, because I needed to know the exact moment my life stopped belonging to me. When the video finished, she was lying against him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then her laugh again, soft and deadly. The room around me felt suddenly too small. The ticking clock on the kitchen wall grew louder until it drowned everything else. I sat back, numb. 17 years with the same woman, and I'd just witnessed a stranger wearing her skin. Outside, rain started tapping on the windows. I went to the garage, sat on the cold floor beside the toolbox, and tried to breathe. The air smelled of oil and steel. My world, the one I built with my hands. She used to tease me for it. "You'll die smelling like gasoline," she'd say, smiling as she kissed my cheek. That memory hit harder than any betrayal. By midnight, I couldn't stay inside the house. I took the truck and drove aimlessly through Brighton Falls. The town was half asleep, half dying. Old neon signs flickered above bars, still open out of habit. The river glimmered in the distance, like a black vein cutting through rusted bone. When I reached the bridge, I parked and stepped out into the rain. Water soaked through my shirt instantly. I leaned on the railing and stared down at the current, wondering how long a man could stand perfectly still before vanishing. That's when the laughter from the video came back, the sound of her joy, bright and cruel. It echoed in my head until it wasn't hers anymore. It was something alive, mocking me. The river below swirled like it could swallow secrets. I thought of all the nights she came home late, the faint scent of hotel soap on her skin. The excuses, meetings, clients, traffic. I'd believe them because I wanted to. Because it's easier to live with lies than to watch truth crawl into bed beside you. Lightning flashed over the water, splitting the sky. For a moment, I saw my reflection on the surface, blurred, indistinct. I didn't look like a man. I looked like a shadow with his name scraped off. Somewhere behind me, a train passed, its horn echoing through the rain. The sound jolted me back to the world. I turned, walked slowly to the truck, and climbed in. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. It was something else, something that felt like clarity. Love had been the foundation of everything I'd built, but that night I realized foundations crack long before the walls collapse. I'd just never noticed the sound. When I got home, the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Her umbrella leaned by the door, still wet from earlier. She was asleep upstairs, maybe dreaming of him. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the faint light spilling under our bedroom door. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Instead, I walked back to the living room, sat down at my desk, and replayed the video once more, this time without emotion, like studying evidence. The rain outside softened to a drizzle. Her laughter came again, bright and sharp. And that was when the first thought, quiet but absolute, whispered through me. If she wanted transparency, I'd give it to her. By dawn, the file still glowed on the screen, a tiny digital wound I couldn't close. I closed the laptop, wiped the condensation from the window, and watched the first hint of light rise over Brighton Falls. The woman sleeping upstairs wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone else's secret. And I, Ethan Cole, mechanic, husband, fool, was finally awake. Morning came the color of old metal. I brewed coffee I didn't want and watched the surface steady, as if calm could be poured. Upstairs, Clara's heels mapped a life we'd rehearsed to perfection. She showered with the door cracked. Steam drifted down like a well-behaved ghost. I opened the laptop. The file waited, patient as a judge. Transparency, she'd preached. No secrets. We share. I clicked download and felt nothing. Not rage, not pity, only purpose, cool and clean as a wrench. She came into the kitchen wrapped in a rain-gray towel. For a second, habit almost reached for her. The line of her collarbone, a drop of water sliding between her breasts, the heat that lifted from her skin. My body remembered what my heart had abandoned. She kissed my cheek. "Big day," she murmured. I caught the faint bite of hotel soap under her perfume and realized how long she'd been practicing. "Big day," I said. The laptop faced away. She didn't notice or didn't care. She poured coffee, arched her back, and a small, humiliating spark rose in me before I killed it. Sex has its own reflexes. Grief isn't in that circuitry. While she dressed, I built a list. Her firm's group chat, the women's association that toasted her promotions, the book club that adored her knives for words, the charity that introduced her to Adrian Keller. One by one, I prepared messages. One by one, I attached the video. She left at 7:12. When her taillights vanished into Brighton Falls, I pressed send. Replies arrived like sirens. A double question mark from a junior associate. Clara from the women's group. The book club moderator typed a long bubble, then evaporated into a brittle, "Is this a joke?" I answered no one. If transparency was a virtue, I was being virtuous. By 8, the town's chats and forums lit up. I felt neither triumph nor shame, just a steady hum in my chest, like a generator after blackout. I pictured partners gathering around a conference screen to study my wife's laugh in a hotel bed with a man whose suit cost more than my lift. At 9, the shop door chimed. Mr. Ellery wanted an oil change, indifferent to the fire I'd set. That was the strangest part. How regular the day insisted on being. I raised his truck and let the plain honesty of bolts and torque take my hands. Grease is a truth you can't scroll past. My phone vibrated until it seemed alive. I ignored it. Brighton Falls would do what it always did. It would feast. Miles arrived with 2 coffees and the expression men wear at funerals when they don't trust their voices. "You sure? You ever hear her laugh like that?" He didn't ask from where. He didn't need to. "Revenge eats its own tail," he said. "Then let it," I said. I'm done being devoured quietly. Screenshots looped back to me from numbers I didn't recognize. A client texted, "Brutal, but respect." Another, "Man damn." Someone launched a shaky thread about power and marriage under a banner called Transparency King. None of it touched me. All that mattered was that the sound of her joy now had witnesses. At 11:03, the storm arrived, Clara. The door didn't open. It detonated. Hair perfect, lipstick a weapon. "What did you do?" she asked, voice a bright wire. Panic flickered behind her courtroom calm. I didn't look up. "Transparency," I said, tightening a bolt. "You uploaded private." She caught herself, sharpened. "Take it down. Now. Then you'll apologize in writing." "You wanted to be seen," I said, finally meeting her eyes. "Now everyone's watching." Tears gathered but refused to fall, the way she refused weakness unless it paid. "You've ruined me," she whispered. "I didn't ruin you," I said, wiping my hands. I turned on the lights. She stepped close. The scent of her skin hit like an old song. For a heartbeat, I wanted to pull her in, to bury my face in the neck I'd mapped. Flash of our bed. Her knees around my waist, the soft profanity of sex, the gasp of my name. The memory cut clean. I let it go. Steele returned to her posture. Lawyers, she said. By this afternoon. It's a copy, I said. The original lived in the cloud you insisted we share. I nodded up at that bright, borderless sky. You taught me to trust systems. She looked at me then, not as husband or opponent, but as an unfamiliar instrument. Heavy, irreversible. Fear, new and real, crossed her face. She pivoted. The stiletto bit concrete. The door shook. I lowered Ellery's truck and left a mint on the passenger seat, like always. The phone pulsed with calls. Her mother, her sister, unknown numbers. I let their voices fall into the well of voicemail, where sincerity and strategy echo the same. At lunch, I ate a tasteless sandwich at the river, while gulls heckled the wind. Across the water, the courthouse glinted, a clean blade in a dirty town. Perhaps transparency is just a blade we pretend is light. By 2, the firm suspended her. By 3, the book club erased her for values. By 4, someone posted a still with a cruel caption, and I closed the app, not because I regretted the truth, but because cruelty was never my point. The point was ending the lie. Not to humiliate her, though humiliation would work, but to stop humiliating myself by carrying it alone. Miles texted, Jim tonight. Hit something that hits back. I answered, later. I wasn't done letting the day finish what it started. Dusk found me in the garage doorway. The river turned from steel to ink. Rain rehearsed itself in the gutters. The town would say I'd gone too far. Others would whisper I'd finally done what every betrayed heart dreams. They would all be correct, and none of it would change the new fact in me. I could breathe. I went inside, turned off the lights one by one, and locked the shop. In the dark, my phone's last notification blinked like a small lighthouse trying to forgive the shore. I didn't open it. I knew who I was now and what I had set in motion. Brighton Falls was never kind to the quiet. The town had a hunger for stories, especially the kind that bled. My story, our story, was a banquet. By dawn the day after the upload, I couldn't drive a single block without feeling eyes on me. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly remembered my name. Some waved. Some looked away. A few smiled that thin, guilty smile of people who love you more for your destruction. At the gas station, the attendant, Marcy, tilted her head when she handed me change. Rough week, huh? She said, voice soft, curious. She didn't ask directly. Nobody ever does. They just open little wounds and watch if you flinch. I didn't. I simply nodded, got into the truck, and drove to the shop. Inside, the air smelled of solvent and rust, a smell that could scrub anything clean except conscience. I turned on the radio. Talk shows. Whispers. One segment debated ethics in relationships. Another mentioned a certain local scandal involving a lawyer and a mechanic. The hosts laughed the way hyenas laugh around a carcass they didn't kill. By noon, Clara's firm had officially suspended her. Someone leaked the internal memo online. Half the town had it screenshotted before lunch. The rest was wildfire. Customers arrived in waves. They didn't come for tune-ups. They came to see the man who'd done it. One woman, sharp-eyed and bold, leaned on the counter, tracing circles on the metal with a manicured finger. I'd have done the same, she said, almost purring. Maybe worse. I pretended not to hear the suggestion in her tone. Brighton Falls had always worn civility, like makeup, cracked and too thick. Beneath it, gossip was the bloodstream. By evening, the video was legend. My old friend Miles came by after closing. He carried 2 beers, and that look he got before fights in his boxing days. He handed me one, cracked his own, and leaned against the hood of a car I was rebuilding. Town's eating it up, he said. Never seen folks so entertained since the mayor's affair. Guess I gave them dessert, I said. He took a long drink. Listen. Revenge feels clean until it doesn't. You put blood in the water. They'll feed on her. Then they'll feed on you. I met his eyes. Let them. I'm done hiding. He studied me a moment, then sighed. You keep watching that damn video. I didn't answer. That was enough. When he left, I locked up and sat in the dark. The hum of the shop lights faded, leaving only the tick of cooling metal. I reached for my phone, opened the file again. Not out of masochism, at least that's what I told myself, but for precision, to measure the distance between what I had and what I lost. There she was, radiant and alive, laughing as if nothing in the world could touch her. Adrian's hand on her thigh, the way she leaned into him, the small arch of her back. Tiny details burned deeper than any scream. The video wasn't about sex anymore. It was about truth. The kind that doesn't blink. I watched until I couldn't feel my hands. Then I deleted it from my phone, only to restore it from the cloud moments later. Addiction wears many names. The next day, business doubled. Men came pretending to need oil changes. Women came pretending to ask about quotes. Everyone wanted a look at Ethan Cole, the man who'd burned his wife alive with a click. Some admired me. Others feared me. Both were intoxicating in their own ways. But the worst were the sympathetic ones. The ones who called me brave. They didn't know that bravery wasn't what kept me steady. It was emptiness. Once you lose everything, you realize fear was a luxury. By week's end, Clara's face had vanished from every social feed, every firm photo. Even her law degree on the firm's website was gone, like she'd never passed the bar. Her mother left messages on my voicemail, angry, tearful, pleading. You've ruined her, she said. Do you feel proud? I didn't. I felt finished. That night, I walked downtown. The tavern buzzed with the smell of cheap beer and rumors. Conversations dipped as I entered. Eyes turned. Then the bartender nodded and poured me one without asking. That was Brighton Falls hospitality. We'll crucify you, but we'll still sell you a drink. At a corner booth, a couple whispered my name. The woman bit her lip, half smiling. Her partner leaned in to hush her, but I saw the envy in his stare. Maybe he wished he had the courage or the madness to expose his own private hell. When I stepped back into the cold, rain was starting again. It had rained the night I found the video. It felt right that it rained now. Back home, the house was still half hers. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her perfume still slept in the air. I opened a drawer and found one of her silk blouses. White, smooth, faintly scented. I pressed it to my face and felt nothing. Not love. Not hate. Just distance. I sat on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and realized I'd become something Brighton Falls adored and feared in equal measure. A story. In this town, stories don't die. They're chewed, swallowed, and spat back up until they fit the gossip. Mine was no longer about betrayal. It was about spectacle. And I, Ethan Cole, was both villain and hero, depending on who you asked. But none of them knew what I knew, that the laughter in that video still echoed in my head when I closed my eyes, that I'd traded one kind of prison for another. And as I drifted toward sleep, rain pattering against the window like soft applause, I wondered which would come first, her fall or my peace. The first time I saw Adrian Keller in person, I almost didn't recognize him without the shadows of the hotel room. He walked into my shop like he owned the Air tailored charcoal suit, watch that probably cost more than my first car, smile polished enough to blind saints. The kind of man who'd never lifted anything heavier than his own ego. I was under a Chevy, half grease, half sweat, when his voice drifted in. Smooth, confident, the tone of someone who mistakes charm for power. Mr. Cole, he said, you've caused quite the commotion. I slid out from under the car and wiped my hands. You brought it here, I said. He smiled, showing teeth that had probably never tasted regret. I didn't come to fight. I came to talk. Clara's situation is unfortunate, but she's resilient. Unfortunate, I repeated. That what you call it when you screw another man's wife? His smirk twitched, just slightly. You make it sound so crass. She wasn't happy, Ethan. She told me that herself. Said you were distant, mechanical. That your marriage had been over for years. The words didn't sting. They landed flat, dull. I'd already imagined her saying them. You rehearsed that speech? I asked. Or do you just recycle it for every husband? He chuckled, low and deliberate. You think this is about conquest? It wasn't. What Clara and I had, it was real. We connected. She felt seen. I stepped closer, the smell of oil and metal cutting through his expensive cologne. Then why come here? He straightened his cuffs, stalling. Because I respect you. I wanted to make sure this spiral of vengeance doesn't get any worse. For her sake. That line almost made me laugh. Her sake, I said. You're worried about her reputation now that everyone's seen what you did together? He hesitated, then smiled again, thinner this time. We can make this go away. I have influence resources. People will forget. I wiped my hands slowly on a rag, watching him. His confidence was brittle, a painted shell. I could see it in the way his pupils tightened when I didn't look away. You think this is over? I asked quietly. He blinked. Excuse me. It hasn't even started. He tried to hold my gaze, but something shifted in him, a flicker of unease. For the first time, I saw a crack in the armor. He realized what kind of man I'd become, the kind who has nothing left to lose. He cleared his throat, forced a laugh. Threats won't fix what's broken. No, I said, stepping closer until he could smell the sweat and oil. But they can balance it. Adrian looked around the shop, at the walls smeared with years of labor, at the photographs of cars, of Clara back when she used to visit bringing lunch in paper bags. You think you're punishing me, he said, softer now. But she chose me, Ethan. That's the part you can't handle. I studied him, calm as the rain outside. You're wrong, I said. What I can't handle is that she chose someone who thinks love is something you buy. For a second, silence filled the space between us, thick and hot. Then he smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll regret this, he said, turning toward the door. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. He paused, hand on the handle, the rain flashing silver behind him. You can't keep your business clean if you play dirty, he murmured. I nodded. Guess we'll see whose hands wash easier. The bell chimed as he left. His car, a black Maserati, roared to life like a spoiled child. I watched the taillights disappear down the street, then turned back to the Chevy. My pulse was steady, my hands sure. I'd stared into his smug, expensive face and felt nothing but clarity. He thought this was about love. It wasn't. It was about power, about control, about taking back the space where his shadow had been allowed to grow. That night, I poured whiskey until the glass sweated. Clara hadn't called. Maybe she was with him, whispering plans, rehearsing lies. I didn't care. The whiskey burned, but not as much as silence used to. Miles called around midnight. He really came by? Yeah, I said. Jesus. What did he want? To talk. And I listened. Miles grunted. You planning to hit him? No, not yet. I ended the call and went outside. The rain had slowed to a mist. Street lights painted the pavement amber. I walked to the edge of the property, to where Clara's rose bushes still stood, overgrown and wild. The petals were bruised from weather, like everything else she'd left behind. I knelt, touched one of the flowers. It crumbled under my fingers, fragile, temporary. That was when I realized something. Adrian thought he'd come to disarm me, to reassert control. But he'd done the opposite. He'd handed me permission to dig deeper, to uncover everything. Because men like him always left trails. And I intended to follow every single one. When I went back inside, the house was cold. I opened the laptop, stared at the folder again. The video was still there, but now it was just evidence. Proof of a pattern. Clara was a symptom. Adrian was the disease. And for the first time since that night by the river, I smiled. Not because I felt good, because I finally knew what came next. The courier looked barely 20 and held a waterproof envelope at my shop door like it might burn him. The clock over my lift read 10:17. The Chevy on the rack dripped old oil. Ethan Cole, he asked. I signed without reading. He fled. Inside, I sliced the envelope with a box cutter. Divorce petition. Temporary restraining order. Defamation claim. I read them at the bench, grease on my fingers, touching the life they were trying to itemize. Clara wanted the house. Half the shop. $75,000 for emotional damages arising from public humiliation. Attachments followed. Screenshots of my messages sending the video, circled, annotated. A still of her mouth before the kiss, cropped to look like prayer. I was supposed to break here. Husband rages, husband regrets, husband pays. But I'd already watched the collapse. The dust had settled. There was nothing left to fear, except the lie. I called the number Miles had pressed into my palm, the one for when the other side hires God. Vance Law, the receptionist said. Mara in. Consults are Thursday. I'll swing a wrench in your lobby till then, I said. Tell her it's Ethan Cole. I brought a storm. The storm arrived at 2 p.m. in the form of a woman with gray eyes and a black suit that moved like it had its own spine. Mara Vance shook my hand like testing torque. Her office was spare. On the wall, a single frame ticket from a heavyweight fight. I take it you're not here to apologize, she said, sliding the papers across a table that looked like it had survived better men. Not to you. She skimmed with a predator's patience. House, half the shop, $75K. The restraining order is performative. The defamation claim is ambitious. She glanced up. Did you upload the video? I shared the truth. Which is also publishing, she said. Legally relevant. She tapped the petition. These demands are absurd. But absurdity has teeth. I'm not chasing money, I said. I want the truth to stand under light. Clara, Adrian, the whole ecosystem. Revenge clients talk like that for 3 weeks, she said. Then they remember they like beds and solvency. I don't want her money. I want the pattern exposed. She watched me a beat, listening for the hidden rattle. Fine. We counter. Dispute damages, contest equitable distribution, move to strike defamation as public interest disclosure. If you've got skeletons, I need their names and shoe sizes. My mistakes are old and boring, I said. Adrian's aren't. Her lips ticked. Then we'll pry. She laced her fingers. One more thing. Settle if she offers clean terms. No. Revenge doesn't rebuild you. Then I'll build something new. She leaned back. You fight like men who don't mind being hit. They can be fun. They can also die on their feet. I left lighter than I'd arrived. Outside, Brighton Falls wore its late afternoon face. Coffee cups, arguments, suspicion, disguised as errands. A woman brushed past me, her hair sparking a reflex. Clara, after a shower, damp and warm, slipping by in a towel barely tied. Heat spiked to my chest, involuntary. Desire is a ghost. It doesn't care who owns the body. Back at the shop, I spread the papers beside a carburetor I'd been rebuilding. One machine honest, the other made of accusation. I could fix one. The other required patience and another kind of grease. An unknown number rang. I let it die, then checked the transcript. Clara's mother, you're a disgrace. Be a man and settle. Delete. I wasn't a man to her anymore. I was a lever. At dusk, a courier dropped a certified letter from Clara's firm. Elegant the way a scalpel is elegant. I didn't open it yet. I pulled the blinds, locked the door, sat on the office chair that still squeaked where she used to mock. In the dark, the shop became a cathedral of steel. I heard the tick of cooling rotors, the scratch of rain in the gutter, my heart steady as a torque wrench. I thought of Clara's hands on my back years ago, of nights we didn't sleep because wanting felt like air. Sex had been fluent between us, a language we didn't need to rehearse. When did fluency turn to silence? Was it while I counted brake pads, and she counted billable hours? Or the first time she lied, and the lie fit, so well it felt like a dress tailored in a mirror she didn't have to share? I opened the letter. Cease and desist, threat of sanctions, the usual threats. At the bottom, a signature I knew from press releases, Adrian's attorney. And then it clicked. This wasn't a divorce, it was a merger. Clara and Adrian had formed an entity to salt the earth where I stood. They wanted the house, the shop, the apology, the confession. They wanted to rewrite the story until I was the abuser, and they were two consenting adults exploited by a vindictive husband. I took out the folder I'd started after Adrian visited. Notes on his businesses, the shells, the gym account he paid in cash. receipts, observations, names of women who'd faded from photos after events he'd sponsored. Patterns have rhythms. Once you hear them, you can hum along. I called Mara. "I'll need subpoenas," I said. "Bank records, corporate structures, NDAs. And I've got a lead." "On what?" "Adrian's locker at the boxing gym," I said. "He's careless when he sweats." "Careless men are my favorite adversaries," she said. "Don't break the law." "Wouldn't dream of it," I lied. After we hung up, I sat with the papers and listened to the rain harden. I wasn't calm. Calm is the lake. I was the current below it, pulling, invisible, inevitable. They wanted to litigate a marriage. I intended to prosecute a predator. When I killed the lights, I watched my reflection in the office window dissolve into night. For a heartbeat, I saw her beside me, the old version, fingers tucked in my back pocket, daring me to take the world. I let the vision stand, then walked through it like fog. Tomorrow, I'd visit the gym. The gym smelled of sweat, disinfectant, and the ghosts of failed promises. It was the kind of place men like Adrian used for performance, not transformation. Mirrors brighter than the souls staring into them. I signed in under a fake name and slipped through the locker room after closing, past the rows of metal doors, whispering with echoes of locker slams and half-kept vows. His locker was easy to spot. Even absent, Adrian Keller managed to make a space arrogant. Stainless steel padlock, no dents, towel folded like a trophy on the bench below. I'd watched him train here once, weeks ago. The staff adored him. Charisma was his camouflage. I sat on the bench, the phone light trembling in my hand. I knew the risk. Breaking and entering. Theft. Felony. But I told myself the same thing every man does before he crosses a line. I just need the truth. The padlock wasn't a problem. Years fixing engines had taught me how to feel tension, to read the hesitation in steel. 3 clicks later, it opened like it had been waiting. Inside were the things you'd expect from a man who believed image was armor. Imported cologne, gym shoes barely scuffed, a gold money clip, and a phone, slim, black, forgotten or abandoned. Maybe he thought no one would dare touch it. I hesitated only once before turning it on. The screen blinked alive, demanding a password. My pulse kept time with the rain outside. Clara, 22. It unlocked on the 3rd try. The first thing I saw was a gallery of women. Faces I didn't know, each smiling, each saved with names followed by numbers, initials, maybe cities. Clara's photos were older, buried deeper. A sign that she'd been his first or simply the longest lasting. Messages scrolled like a confession, without conscience. Promises. Threats. Demands for loans that would never be repaid. Photos sent in fear. Recordings. He was a collector, of risk, of weakness, of submission. I scrolled through one thread until my stomach turned. A woman begging him to delete a video. His reply, "You'll pay me first." Another, "You introduced me to Clara. Remember who started this." Her name stopped me, Megan L., one of Clara's friends from law school. I remembered her visiting once, bright, nervous, laughing too loudly. Clara hadn't just fallen into Adrian's orbit. She'd fed it. I scrolled faster, heart pounding. The locker room's silence tightening around me. Dozens of names. Dozens of transactions. And Clara's number threaded through them all. Her messages coordinating meetings, smoothing introductions, promising confidentiality. She wasn't his victim. She was his recruiter, maybe unknowingly, maybe not, but involved all the same. I took screenshots, each one a nail in a coffin neither of them knew I was building. My thumb moved automatically. Tap, capture, tap, capture. Evidence stored in the cloud that had started everything. By the time I looked up, the rain had stopped. Only the hum of fluorescent lights filled the room. I placed the phone back, relocked the door, and left as quietly as I'd arrived. Outside, Brighton Falls glistened, wet asphalt reflecting neon from the diner across the street. I sat in the truck, hands trembling, staring at the images on my own phone. Proof. Confirmation. Damnation. Clara hadn't cheated out of lust or boredom. She'd wandered into something darker, and stayed because it benefited her. I could almost hear Adrian's voice in those messages, grooming, charming, coercing. But she had a choice, and she'd made it. When I got home, I printed every screenshot. The machine spat out page after page, each one a fragment of a secret world. The hum of the printer felt like a heartbeat. I spread the papers across the kitchen table, still slick from raindrops on my jacket. Names, dates, account numbers. I traced my finger over Clara's messages, the way her tone changed from fear to complicity. It was all there. For a moment, anger gave way to something colder, understanding. Adrian wasn't just a predator. He was a businessman. Clara had been his bridge into higher circles, lawyers, donors, clients with too much to lose. And when the bridge began to crack, he seduced the person holding it up. I poured whiskey into a chipped glass and watched the liquid catch the dim light. The first sip burned like memory. Somewhere upstairs, the bed she used to sleep in waited, untouched since the day she left. I thought about the nights we'd shared there, the slow rhythm of sex that once meant trust. How she'd whisper my name like a promise, how I'd believed it was truth. That memory was a ghost now, pacing the walls of my house. I looked down at the papers again. There it was, the proof that the affair wasn't just betrayal. It was business, manipulation, and exploitation. I didn't just lose a wife. I'd been married to an accessory. When I finally slept, it was at the kitchen table. The evidence spread around me like a graveyard of every illusion I'd ever built. The last thing I remember before the dark took me was the faint hum of the printer cooling down, the smell of ink in the air, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had their secrets, and that soon they'd have nothing left to hide behind. It began with silence. Not the kind that soothes, the kind that waits. 3 days after I'd found Adrian's phone, Clara stopped pretending I didn't exist. My calls went unanswered, but the city buzzed with the fallout. Adrian Keller's investments were suddenly under review. His gym closed for renovations. I'd only pulled one thread, and already the fabric was fraying. Then the phone call started, not from him, but from her. I didn't pick up the first dozen. On the 13th, I listened to the voicemail. "Ethan, please," she said, her voice ragged. "You don't know what he's capable of." I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Her tone shook, but I heard the rehearsed edges. Guilt shaped into performance. I deleted it. She called again that night, then again the next morning. When I didn't answer, she switched tactics, sent her sister. It was raining again, like the weather in Brighton Falls couldn't let go of my misery. I was under a lifted truck when I heard the knock. I wiped my hands and opened the door to find Lydia standing there. Same blue eyes, same sharp features as Clara, but stripped of the polish. She looked scared. "She's in the hospital," Lydia said. They pumped her stomach. For a second, everything inside me stopped moving. The wrench fell from my hand and clanged against the concrete. "What?" "She took pills. A lot of them. Said she didn't want to wake up." I drove through the rain like it could wash me clean. The hospital lights glowed sterile and merciless. Room 214. The door was half open. Clara lay there, skin pale, lips cracked, and for feeding her something clear and slow. The monitors beeped softly, a rhythm reminding me she was still here, whether I wanted her to be or not. Her eyes opened when I entered. "Ethan," she whispered. I stood by the door. "You look alive." She tried to smile, but it trembled apart. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know what else to do." I stepped closer. "You could have stopped lying." Tears slid down her temples. "I didn't know he was blackmailing anyone. I swear. He told me they were investments, that we were helping people." I pulled a folder from under my jacket and set it on her lap. Pages spilled out, screenshots, transfers, messages. "You helped him pick them," I said quietly. "You just didn't know you were next." Her hands shook as she flipped through the papers. Each page carved her expression a little smaller. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He used me." "Used you?" I said. "You sent him names. You introduced him to half those women. I thought it was for charity events. He said he wanted to sponsor." "Stop," I said, sharper than I meant. "You knew enough. You just didn't look." The silence between us thickened until it felt like a wall. Finally, she looked up. "What are you going to do?" I sat down beside her, the vinyl chair groaning under my weight. You're going to testify. You're going to tell the truth, every message, every account, every name. And in return, I'll make sure the feds hear your side first. She swallowed hard. And if I don't? I leaned forward until she could smell the oil and rain on my jacket. Then I send everything to the press. Every file, every photo. You'll go down with him. Her face twisted, part anger, part despair. You hate me that much? I don't hate you, I said. If I did, I'd have let you die. She stared at me for a long time before nodding. Her hand trembled as she reached for a pen from the bedside table. I slid a confession form across the tray, a simple statement drafted by Mara, ready for signatures. Clara's handwriting looked like it was dissolving as she wrote. When she was done, I took the paper and folded it carefully, sliding it back into my jacket. You'll get a call from my lawyer. She'll protect you if you cooperate. Clara's voice broke. Ethan, I loved you. I still don't, I said. Love doesn't survive this kind of truth. It just rots slower. Her breath hitched. I stood to leave. The beeping of the monitor followed me to the door. Before I stepped out, I looked back once. She was staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open, whispering something I couldn't hear. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the parking lot. The clouds were breaking apart, thin ribbons of light cutting through the gray. I sat in the truck, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't feel victory, just weight, heavy and constant. Back home, I placed the confession on the table beside the printed evidence. The air smelled of ink and gasoline. I poured whiskey and stared at the paper, Clara's signature curling across the bottom like a scar. Miles called. You okay? No, I said. But she will be. Meaning she's going to help me bury him. He didn't reply for a moment. Then, softly, you're getting too deep, brother. I looked at the papers, at her name beside Adrian's, the tangled web that had strangled us all. I'm already there, I said. When I finally shut off the light, the house creaked like an old confession. Outside, the river whispered through the dark, carrying everything I couldn't. Tomorrow, Adrian Keller would learn what it felt like to lose control. I didn't choose the bar, Adrian did. That told me he was rattled. He liked neutral ground with witnesses who could later claim he'd been civilized. The place sat low on the highway, a roadhouse where the neon open buzzed like a fly in a jar. I arrived first. I wanted the corners, the mirrors, the exits. The bartender slid me a soda. I was saving my edge. He came 5 minutes late in a navy suit that didn't belong to our town, hair perfect, smile rehearsed. He shook rain from his cuffs, as if weather existed to disobey him. Ethan, he said, warm as polished wood. Thanks for coming. I wasn't busy. He sat, posture athletic, eyes doing quick feline cuts. Let's begin with honesty. You have something of mine. Which thing? I asked. Your conscience or your phone? His smile thinned. You broke the law. You built an industry on it. He steepled his fingers. You've caused unnecessary pain. To Clara. To the women you've contacted. I contacted no one, I said. They're finding me. They're not calling to defend you. He peered at my glass. Sure you don't want something stronger? I'm buying. I'm recording, I said, lifting the coaster and tapping once. He tracked the motion. Predators follow movement. A sliver of metal blinked, then slept. That won't be admissible everywhere, he said, polish slipping. Neither will whatever threat you brought. He set a thumb drive on the table. Dashcam footage. Weeks after the separation. You followed Clara. A prosecutor might call it stalking. I pushed it back. I followed my wife to see if she was safe. You followed my partner, he corrected. There it was, the arrogance. In the right court, you're the abuser, and we're two adults who made a mistake leaving a bad marriage. I brought a better narrative, I said, sliding out a manila folder. I didn't open it. Transfers. Offshores touched from your lake house. Messages where you call them investments, and they call it fear. He leaned despite himself. His cologne reached me, pepper amber, and my body answered like a traitor, remembering the easy current of skin. Sex trains the nerves to answer before the mind can speak. I reined it back. You'd go federal with this? He asked. I already did. He digested that in silence. The bartender polished a glass. You're bluffing. Check your email, I said. Better, check your calendar. He exhaled. What do you want? Wrong question. And the right. What will you give to keep breathing air outside a cell? We stared at each other long enough for the neon to stutter. He tried another angle. Clara could be implicated by anything you think you know. You won't risk your daughter hating you. You underestimate how little I sleep and how much I can live with. Cold air knifed in. He tapped the table twice. Hypothetically, he said, if I were to wire funds, substantial funds, and make certain problems vanish. This isn't ransom, I said. It's a reckoning. He hated the word. You expect me to disappear? Yes. Quietly. Tonight. He laughed, a short bark that showed a seam in the mask. Men like me don't disappear. They do when they've been bait all along. Explain. You were careful in front. Messy in back. Shells that share IPs, NDAs reused, a Cayman account ping from your own Wi-Fi. I have the map. So do people who sign warrants. He stared, legend wrestling evidence. You're still bluffing, he said, but it sounded like a wish. I set my phone beside the folder, screen down. This is our conversation. Living in 3 places already. You can threaten me with dash cams and PR firms, or you can take your suit and your hunger and leave Brighton Falls before sunrise. What about Clara? He asked quieter. She'll tell the truth, I said. Decide whether you want to hear it in a courtroom. Silence again, dense as smoke. He looked at the door, then at his reflection in the bar mirror. He pocketed the thumb drive. You think you're the hunter, he said. I never was. You were the bait. You lured me in and taught me where to put the hooks. He rose. For a second I thought he might reach for me or the folder. But the performance was over. You won't hear from me again, he said. I will, I said. In headlines. He smoothed his lapels. Good night, Ethan. Leave the state, I said. Start there. He went out into the mist. The door side shut. I let the recorder run another minute, listening to neon and glassware and the ragged beat of my heart. The bartender set a real drink in front of me. On the house, he said. I'm driving. For the road you didn't take. I didn't touch it. I gathered the folder and the phone and stepped into the night. Across the lot, a black car idled, then pulled away, taillights swallowed by wet dark. On the drive home, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. 3 words. I heard him. Another, thank you. Then another. Voices accumulating like rain. Women stepping out of silence into cold air. I didn't answer. I let them arrive until the road felt crowded with the living. I parked, killed the lights, and stood in my doorway listening to the house breathe. Somewhere upstairs, a bed waited, guilty and clean at the same time. I felt the urge, not for victory, just for simple heat. Touch is a habit that quits slower than love. I clenched my fists until the want receded. I put the folder in the safe behind the photo of my first shop. Then I sat on the floor of the dark living room, back against the couch where we'd made love on lazy Sundays, where her laugh had been music before it became a weapon. The recorder clicked off, a period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing since the river. Adrian would leave town. Or he wouldn't. Either way, his orbit had decayed. Tomorrow would bring agents or headlines or both. Tonight brought quiet, heavy. For the first time in months, I felt human again. 3 months later, Brighton Falls had a new obsession: justice. The town that once whispered my name like a curse now spoke it like punctuation. Every conversation circled back to Adrian Keller, the man who'd turned charity into blackmail. The morning news did it first. Adrian Keller arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. The headline scrolled beneath his mugshot, the same smile only hollowed. I stood in the shop doorway with a cup of burnt coffee and watched the screen in disbelief. The man who had once swaggered into my life wearing a $1,000 suit was now handcuffed, jaw clenched, the charm stripped clean. Mara called before I could even exhale. You seen this? Yeah. He's done. The feds raided his properties, found multiple hard drives. The phone you handed over sealed it. I leaned against the counter, eyes on the gray sky. What about Clara? Cooperating witness. No prison time. The bar association's moving to revoke her license. She'll never practice law again. I didn't answer. The words settled heavy, like dust after demolition. Justice, maybe, but not victory. When I closed the shop that afternoon, the sun broke through for the first time in weeks. The air smelled clean, almost forgiving. I sat on the back steps, watching the light crawl across the pavement. The phone buzzed, a message for my daughter, Emma. Saw the news. Is it true? Yeah, I wrote back. It's over. You okay? I hesitated, then typed, getting there. An hour later, she showed up in person. Emma hadn't visited since the video, since the house became a museum of mistakes. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her mother's eyes burning through mine. I used to hate you, she said. I thought you destroyed everything. I nodded. You weren't wrong. But she told me, Emma said quietly, about Adrian, about what he did, about what you found. She told you. She didn't have to. I saw it on the news. You didn't just destroy her, Dad. You saved her. You just did it the only way you knew how. I wanted to say I didn't save anyone, that I'd simply dragged the truth into daylight and let it burn whoever stood too close. But instead, I just said, sit. You want coffee? We drank in silence, steam curling like ghosts of every word we'd left unsaid. The sound of wrenches clinking on metal filled the gaps. For the first time in months, the shop didn't feel haunted. Later that evening, I drove to the courthouse steps where reporters had gathered earlier. They were gone now. Only the echo of their questions remained. I sat on the hood of my truck and stared at the marble columns, imagining Adrian being led through them, his hands cuffed, the cameras flashing like punishment. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. Just tired. Mara met me there, her heels clicking across the wet stone. You know they'll want a statement, she said. The press. The victims. The bureau. Everyone's building a narrative. Let them, I said. I'm done telling stories. She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled, not warmly, but with respect. You're rare, Ethan. Most people chase closure until it kills them. Maybe it already did. That night back home, I opened the safe and took out the last copy of the files, the ones that could bury Clara for good. I stared at them under the yellow kitchen light. Her messages, her introductions, her complicity. All the evidence I hadn't handed over. I thought about Emma, about the way her voice softened when she said her mother's name. I thought about Clara's hand trembling as she signed the confession, her voice cracking on the word sorry. Then I fed the papers one by one into the fireplace. The flames licked them up greedily, curling the ink into smoke. I didn't do it for her. I did it so I could sleep. The house smelled like ash and rain. Outside, the street was empty, the town finally done feeding on us. I poured another drink and watched the last page burn, the one with Clara's signature. When I finally went upstairs, the bed was still cold, but it no longer felt like punishment. It just felt like mine. The next morning, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Mara or Emma. It was an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, shaky but strong. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. You saved my life. He had something on me too, but it's gone now. Another call came that afternoon. Then another that night. One by one, the ghosts Adrian had trapped began speaking again, finding their way back into the light. Each voice pulled a little weight off my chest. Not forgiveness, not redemption, just release. When the last call ended, I stepped outside. The sun was setting over Brighton Falls, casting the town in gold. For once, it didn't look rusted. It looked reborn. I closed my eyes, felt the air on my face, and realized something simple. The storm was finally over. Brighton Falls moves on quickly, but it never forgets. The scandal that had once devoured the town was now a bedtime story for gossip-hungry nights. I became something between a cautionary tale and a local myth, the man who burned his marriage and rose from the ashes. It had been 6 months since Adrian's arrest. The papers stopped printing his name. Clara's face no longer appeared in online forums. The noise had died down, replaced by the steady hum of ordinary life. My shop thrived again. People liked coming to see me now, maybe to shake the hand of someone who'd done what they only dreamed of doing. Maybe because they saw a reflection of their own betrayals in mine. I didn't ask. I just fixed engines, took payments, and watched the season shift. The air smelled cleaner. The days felt lighter. Even the rain, when it came, seemed softer. One evening, I was closing up the garage when the phone rang. The number was blocked. I almost ignored it, but curiosity has a way of reaching for the weak parts of a man. "Mr. Cole," the voice said. "Mail firm official. This is Agent Rourke with the Bureau. We're finalizing the Keller case. We wanted to confirm your involvement in the tip that initiated the investigation." I looked at the wall clock ticking above the workbench. "No idea what you're talking about," I said. There was a pause. "Understood," he replied. "If we have further questions, we'll be in touch. Thank you for your time." He hung up. I smiled. That was closure, not an ending, but a door quietly locking behind me. The shop was empty, the air thick with the scent of oil and old stories. I turned off the lights and stepped outside. Dusk had painted the town in amber, the kind of glow that made rust look like gold. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from an unknown number. "Thank you. You saved my life." Then another. "He can't hurt me anymore." Then another and another. Victims of Adrian's schemes. Names I didn't know, voices from the shadows, finally breathing in open air. I scrolled through them, each one a quiet victory. The night breeze lifted the scent of the river. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Not threatening, just reminding. I walked to the edge of a lot and looked toward the water. The same river where I'd once sat in the rain, ready to disappear. The current looked calmer now. I didn't notice the last message until the screen dimmed. It was from a familiar number, one I hadn't seen in months. "Clara." I hesitated before opening it. "Can we talk? Just once. I need to understand why you stopped." For a long time, I stood there under the dim light, thumb hovering over the reply. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her voice stay buried where it belonged. But the other part, the part that still remembered her laugh before it turned poisonous, couldn't let the story end unfinished. I called. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was quiet, thinner somehow, like the edge had been filed down. "You could have destroyed me," she said. "Why didn't you?" I leaned against the truck, eyes on the river. "Because love isn't what you said it was," I said finally. "It's what you do when it's over." She didn't speak. The only sound was the soft rush of water and the wind moving through the trees. "Do you hate me?" she asked at last. "No," I said. "But I don't miss you either." She exhaled, maybe a sob, maybe relief. "I'm leaving Brighton Falls," she said. "There's nothing left here for me." "There never was," I said, and ended the call before she could say goodbye. I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked up. The clouds were breaking, stars bleeding through the cracks. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't see ghosts in the light. I thought about the man I used to be, the mechanic who believed in transparency, in truth, in shared passwords and perfect love. He was gone now, buried somewhere under the wreckage of our marriage. In his place stood someone else, someone quieter, harder, but free. The next morning, Emma came by with coffee. "You look different," she said. "Lighter?" I asked. She smiled. "Older. But yeah, lighter too." We sat on the porch, the shop doors open to the sunlight, the smell of metal and earth mixing in the air. For once, Brighton Falls didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a beginning. When she left, I walked back inside, grabbed a rag, and wiped my hands. The radio hummed softly, old blues, the kind of music that forgives you while reminding you why you sinned. I looked around the shop, the place that had outlasted the marriage, the scandal, the lies. The place that still stood. The world outside might forget the story someday, but the man who'd lived it didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't a word anymore. It was a decision, and for the first time, I'd made it.